Hi, I'm Brian from Simply Brian Enterprises and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to start off my new playlist of TopTechBoy's Raspberry Pi Pico class. This is going to be what I'm calling lesson number 0 because I'm going to just do some introductory things about how my desk and studio are set up so that you can understand as I start going through the class why I'm doing things the way I'm doing them. Before I begin with that though, I want to do a quick follow-up to my Pi 400 video as there were a couple of things I forgot to mention. The first thing I wanted to point out is that everything I showed you in the Pi 400 video works exactly the same way on the Pi 4B. In fact, just this morning I went through my Pi 4B and did the EEPROM upgrade. You can see that the version that was installed was April 2021, and now it's running the January 2023 version. And I also configured the USB boot and got that same USB boot screen just as I did on the Pi 400. So I was able to confirm if you want to do the multi-boot kind of thing I showed, you can do it on the Pi 4B as well. I haven't had time to test it on the Pi 3 yet. When I do that, I will post below and let you know how it went. Second thing I forgot to mention is that I purchased my Pi 400 in March of 2022 and supply was plentiful. I could go to several sites and I could buy the Pi 400 for $70 US or $100 US for the kit. Here now, a year later, January 2023, that is no longer the case. Supply is starting to dry up of the Pi 400. I think people have figured out that this is really the only reasonably priced way to get their hands on a Pi 4. And so they're starting to disappear. So if you're interested in getting a Pi 400, now is the time. Go search it out. You can still find them, but they're starting to diminish. And thankfully, nobody's price gouging yet. They're still the correct price. Otherwise, of course, the Orange Pi 800 that I showed is also an alternative if you're interested in getting one. Then finally, I wanted to go through something really quick with the idea, kind of taking the USB boot idea to the next level. A 16 gig SD card is more than sufficient for most Pi related tasks. You can easily fit an operating system and all of your development tools and all of these things on there. And even if you have software applications like Linux applications, even if you're using it as a desktop computer, 16 gig is plenty. But small cards are hard to find. In fact, I just went to get another card and the smallest I could find was a 32 gig. So is there something we can do with that extra space? And as it turns out, yes, there is. In addition to just imaging a operating system to a flash card or a USB stick, there is a multi-bootloader available. Actually, there's two of them. This is one that I use. It's called Berry Boot. And the idea is you install the multi-boot loader and it manages multiple images. So I can have all these different environments. Now this here, this is a screenshot from the Berry Boot website. This is not mine, but you kind of get the idea of I'm going to plug in a very large USB stick, like a 256 gig USB stick, and I can put all of these images on there. In addition to the USB stick, we can also use SSD drives. And there's a few videos out there with the Pi 400 talking about using USB drives. I have a USB SSD drives, excuse me. So I have right here a 2.5 inch, 1 terabyte SSD in an external case, USB 3.0, and it's fast. It is so much faster than the SD card or the USB sticks. But that being said, you can still stay with the USB sticks. Again, I showed this one at 64 gig. So if I wanted to, I could put multiple boot environments on that as well. In addition to Berry Boot, there is another tool called PinOS that does a similar thing. And PinOS looks like it's a little more mature than Berry Boot. It has some features that I like. But when I tried to run PinOS on my Pi 400, I ran into a problem where it doesn't support the Wi-Fi card in the Pi 400. Apparently, there's a slight differentiation between the Wi-Fi chip in the Pi 4B and the Pi 400. And so launching PinOS and trying to download boot images from their website was not successful. So I'm using Berry Boot for now. I'm hoping they address that in a future release of PinOS. Okay, You did not watch this video to learn more about the Pi 400. You wanted to know about Pi Pico. So let's get started. First thing we want to talk about is our good friend, where's my mouse? There it is. Our good friend here, the Sunfounder Raspberry Pi Kepler kit. And as is typical with Sunfounder, they put more kit than could fit in the box. And I thought I actually had a photo of the box bulging, but chances are, if you've already ordered your kit, you've seen that when you open the outside cardboard box, the inside plastic case has basically got a bow in it because there's so much stuff jammed into it. And just like I did with my Sunfounder Raphael kit, I repackaged the Kepler kit into a plain old 3750 box. And so I just, you know, I taped the kind of guide covery thing. You can't really see it on camera. There's a little bit. You can see this is the parts listing, and obviously I want to hang on to that. Now, Paul did a pretty good overview of the kit, so I'm not going to retrace his steps. There were a couple things he didn't talk about, though, that I want to bring to your attention because they're pretty cool. The first is this index card that comes with it showing the pinouts. So the Pi Pico has a lot of GPIO, but it also has a lot of specialty GPIO. So if I'm designing a project, I'm going to want to be conscious of, where are my SPIs, where are my I2C buses, because I believe there's a one bus and a two bus. So you have to make sure if you're using SPI, you're um, using the same bus, you're not mixing and matching. Learn that the hard way. And then over here, we've got the pins that are specifically for the ADC. So you probably don't want to use these for general purpose IO. If I'm attaching LEDs, I'm going to go over here and use some of these and free up these for ADC inputs and so forth. So I thought this was a neat little card. They did a really good job with that. So I wanted to highlight that. The other thing I wanted to talk about a little more is the jumpers. So Paul talked about these wire jumpers, and these are fantastic. They make really neat looking breadboards, but we're going to be interfacing with things off of the breadboard. So I'm really glad that they kept the kind of the standard loopy male to male, different lengths, really handy for doing projects like that. And then they also included, this is really my favorite thing, honestly, of the jumpers is these male to female jumpers. So with the Sunfounder Raphael kit, I found myself having to constantly go to my box of jumpers. The big frustration that I have with the Pi in general is that the GPIO pins are male. So anytime I want to interface to the breadboard, I either have to use that breakout cable and the adapter, or I have to use the male to female. And of course, there are no male to female in the Sunfounder Raphael kit, so I had to dig into my own stash. So I really like that they've included that along with this kit. So a lot of fun stuff, a lot of goodness in the box. And now, again, going back to my Plano 3750 video that I did a while ago, just a great way to store the components where everything comes together. All right, so now the question is, why am I going to be using the Pi 400 for the Pico class? What's so special about it? Well, it really comes down to how I got started in Pico. Here's my good friend, the original, it doesn't show up. Let me do this on the desk cam. That was silly. This guy that I purchased almost a year ago now, I think, to get started with Pico, in the guide for this kit, it talked about using Thani on Linux, specifically Linux running on a Raspberry Pi. And so not knowing anything about Pico, not knowing anything about the Windows side of things, I thought, well, okay, I have a Raspberry Pi in the form of this Pi 400. I think that'd be a great platform. So that's what I started using to work on the projects in this Pi Pico kit. And so when it came time to talk about the TopTechBoy Raspberry Pi Pico class, I had to start thinking about what computer I'm going to use. Now I have a Windows computer at this desk slash studio slash workspace um, that obviously would work. The problem is I have a lot of USB devices strung off of it already. I have several cameras, I have a capture device, and I even have a USB video adapter so I can add a monitor to my laptop. my USB bus is a little bit constrained on this system already, and I didn't want to tempt fate by plugging yet another USB device in. So I had to start thinking about what I had for other computers, because basically anything with a USB port will run Thonny. Thonny is pretty easy on resources, so even an older laptop would be fine. And I thought, well, I already have the Pi 400 using for the Pico, among other things, but I use it for the Pico programming. So it seemed like a good fit for this class. So that is why I'm going with the Pi 400. I needed a separate computer, and just the way things are laid out, this seems to be the way to go. So I'm going to flip back to my table view here, and we're going to look at my hardware setup for class. And the camera is a little bit in the way here, so I got to do a little bit of rejiggering here to get this all fitting. So what I've got here, if you remember from my video earlier this week when I talked about um, the cardboard panels, I created another cardboard panel for the Pico class, so I can just, you saw me just move it in right now. Um, just pick it up and move it. There's the whole class right there. So that's kind of neat. And I adapted some things that I had from previous projects that I just either didn't finish or decided it wasn't going to be the right thing for that project. So I have 6 400 pin breadboards all interlocked together. So if you've never noticed before, the breadboards have these little notches on one side, and then they have, I'll try not to bump the camera here too much. They have these little holes on the other side. And so it's designed to interlock with each other so you can actually make a larger breadboard out of smaller breadboards. And of course, what I found is that different manufacturers have different size slots and knobs here. So I purchased this as a 6-pack of breadboards, all the same manufacturer, all the same board. So they interlock together very nicely. Now, I want to point out something here because it came up in one of the classes. Paul made an offhanded comment about the fact that breadboards are not symmetrical, that the power rails are red, blue, red, blue. Well, why not make them red, blue, blue, red and make it symmetrical? And I can think of a couple reasons why that is the case. So the first thing is breadboards, believe it or not, do have a top and a bottom. It's not obvious until you actually read on the board. There is a grid. Each pin has a letter designation by row, number designation by column. And so if you put, I believe what is the top, um, the red stripe is on top, or I should say the positive rail indicated by a red stripe is on top. It's A, B, C, D, E, F, G on down for 10 rows. So I believe that the correct orientation is the positive rail on top. And when you start to interlock them, you find that it's positive rail on top, positive rail on top, positive rail on top. If you flip one around, then your rows and columns aren't going to align the same. So the breadboard does have an actual top and a bottom, left and right designation, and that's why there's numbers and letters on the board. The other thing I've noticed is that the spacing between the positive rail is equidistant to the spacing between the negative rails. So the same size jumper I'm going to use here to go from positive to positive is going to be negative to negative. When I stack these together, positive to negative between the two boards is also the same distance. So I do believe there was a good reason for offsetting them rather than making them symmetrical. So anyway, that's my opinion. If somebody wants to look it up, look it up. Let me know in the comments why are breadboards not symmetrical? But I do believe there's a good reason for it. All right, so now back to my actual setup here. Over on the left side, I have all of my wiring. So I have obviously red and blue cabling designating positive and negative. And then in the midsection, I have jumpers from board to board. I've got red to red, blue to blue. Now, when I come down here, I'm only doing blue. And the reason is because this is where my Pi Picos are. I have the top one is the Pi Pico W that came in the Kepler kit. The bottom is a standard Pi Pico non-W that I ordered long before the W was available, um, so that I have both on my board. And the reason I have that um, is actually because Charlotte made a mention that on the Pico W and the Pico Standard, the internal LED pin is different between the two. And so that got me thinking, well, are there other differences as well? So as I'm developing uh, code against the Pico W, I should really run it against the regular Pico to make sure that my code runs on both platforms. Obviously, the W code, the wireless drivers and so forth aren't going to run on here, but anything else with GPIO really should. So I thought it's a really good idea. Since I have the real estate of these 6 400 pin breadboards, it would make sense to actually put both of them on here. Now, the reason I don't have a positive rail jumpered here is because these are, in most projects, going to be powered independently. They're either going to come from USB off of the Pi 400, or they're going to come off of the LiPo battery. Um, I don't want these things to be powered off off of the positive rail here. I want this. This is going to power all my other components, but then I can tie to ground so that my GPIO pins work and so forth. So if I put a component over here and I tie it to a GPIO pin, the grounds will all be interconnected. Um, so that's the purpose of that. And then finally, I wanted to point out one thing. There was a question raised previously about these 3 pins in the center of the Pico W, and what are those? And those are a serial port for debugging. And I don't know much more than that, but I also learned in the process of working through the Pi 400 / Pi 4 booting that there is actually a serial port available on these as well. So I think it would be kind of fun as a video diversion in the future to go through, actually attach a serial console and see what exactly is on these pins, because I've never done it and I have no idea. But it'd be something kind of fun to begin with. Um, so now let's talk just briefly about wiring this all up. So I have my board here. I have my Pi 400 here. I have my rainbow colored fun cable here to power up the Pi 400. And on this end, I actually have 2 connectors. So I have my female, and that's going to take power from my 5-volt Raspberry Pi adapter. But then I also have this extra male, oh, there it is, this extra male pigtail, and that's going to power my breadboard. Now it's kind of neat because I don't have to power the Pi 400 necessarily. If I just want to power up the breadboard, I have a connector for that as well. I can just take my 5-volt, plug it right into the breadboard, skip the Pi 400 altogether. But when I'm doing development, I'm going to want power to both. So that's how that's set up. And then um, one more thing here I want to show you, maybe one more thing, I don't know, is the Raspberry Pi mouse didn't last long. I really didn't want to be using that for class, so I grabbed one of my, I can't see it here. It's not showing on camera. Why is it not showing on camera? There. So I've got my wireless mouse, and I just plugged the little wireless receiver right into the USB 2.0 port there, and that'll just live there. So that'll be okay. And then finally, I need, there it is. This is the last thing now. All right. I need to connect my Pico into the Pi 400, and the Kepler kit comes with a nice little black cable, but I wanted to have a little more fun than that, so I grabbed the most ridiculous cable I had, which is this glittery purple cable. I thought that'd be a lot more fun when we're doing design on the Pico W. So that is it for this video. I didn't get into the software side because I'm going to save that for lesson number 1. My homework will be late this week because I've been spending so much time setting up my environment and wanted to go through some of these other ideas and get videos created on them. So my lesson 1 video will be late, but yes, it's coming. And I'm looking forward to the TopTechBoy Raspberry Pi class. I'm going to put a link below for the class, a link below for the kit, and I hope to see you soon in class. For Simply Brian Enterprises, this is Brian. Thank you for watching.